September 1st, 1939. Just before dawn. Near the Polish border. Engines idle in the dark. Steel tracks rest in damp grass. Men sit quietly on armored hulls, breath fogging the air. Someone checks a watch. Someone tightens a strap. You can almost feel it, that rare moment before motion, when everything still seems possible. A German tank commander leans out of his hatch, scanning the horizon. The sky is pale, undecided. Orders have already been given. There will be no hesitation. When the engines surge forward, the ground begins to shake. This is confidence made physical. The German army enters the war believing it understands modern combat better than anyone alive. Not just in theory, but in practice. Its officers have studied movement, speed, coordination. They have refined doctrine through training, exercises, and hard-earned lessons from earlier conflicts. They believe war can be shaped, directed, controlled. And in the opening weeks, it seems they are right. Columns advance faster than anyone expects. Enemy defenses fold under pressure. Command posts fall silent almost as soon as they are identified. From the outside, it looks like inevitability. But inside those columns, amid the dust and vibration, something else is happening, quietly, unnoticed. The focus is forward. Always forward. Orders emphasize momentum. Seize the crossing. Exploit the breakthrough. Push deeper. Maps are marked in bold lines pointing ahead. What lies behind receives far less attention. Fuel trucks struggle to keep pace on broken roads. Maintenance crews work through the night to keep vehicles running. Ammunition is counted carefully, not because it is scarce yet, but because resupply depends on movement that never pauses. At this stage, none of it feels dangerous. Early success creates a powerful illusion that the system works because it is brilliant, not because conditions are favorable. You can almost hear it in the voices of the officers. Controlled. Certain. This is how modern war is supposed to look. The doctrine emphasizes decisive action. Short wars. Campaigns won by speed and shock. There is little patience for delay. Even less for reconsideration. Every success reinforces the belief that the fundamentals are sound. And that belief will harden quickly. As operations expand, German formations stretch outward, covering enormous distances. Frontline units move days ahead of their supply elements. Rail lines are converted slowly. Captured infrastructure is damaged, mismatched, or incompatible. Still, the advance continues. No one wants to be the one to slow it down. Within headquarters, reports remain optimistic. Losses are manageable. Objectives are being met ahead of schedule. The war appears to be unfolding exactly as planned. But plans have blind spots. Not obvious ones. Not dramatic ones. Quiet ones. The kind that don't matter when everything is going right, and matter enormously when it stops. Germany's strategic thinking at the start of the war is shaped by experience, but also by assumption. The assumption that future campaigns will resemble the last. That speed will always compensate for depth. That operational brilliance can overcome structural weakness. Those assumptions go largely unchallenged. Not because no one sees the risk, but because success makes risk invisible. Early victories become proof, not just of capability, but of correctness. And correctness is dangerous. As the war widens, Germany commits itself further to a way of fighting that demands constant motion. It relies on coordination across long distances, on precision timing, on uninterrupted flow. The system works, but only under very specific conditions. Conditions Germany does not control. Behind the advancing units, signs of strain begin to appear. Vehicles cannibalized for parts. Fuel allocations tightened quietly. Repair schedules postponed. These are treated as temporary inconveniences. They are not. They are warnings. But warnings are easy to ignore when the front keeps moving forward. By the time German planners begin to recognize the pattern, the war has already changed scale. What began as a series of fast, decisive campaigns is becoming something else. Something longer. broader, more demanding. And the doctrine that once delivered victory now demands a price. Germany entered the war with unmatched confidence in how it would fight. What it failed to confront was not an enemy tactic, but a limitation built into its own way of war. A strategic blind spot that could not be outrun. And once the war slowed down, even briefly, that blind spot would begin to show. Autumn, 1941. Somewhere east of Smolensk. Late afternoon. The road is a single ribbon of mud. Trucks sink axle deep, engines whining as drivers fight for traction. Men climb down to push, boots slipping, curses swallowed by the wind. Ahead, the sound of artillery never stops. The front is still moving, but only just. A German supply officer stands beside the road, notebook in hand, watching the line stretch into the distance. He does the math automatically. Too many vehicles. Too little fuel. Too far to go. You can almost feel the shift, that moment when speed becomes weight. For the first time, the German way of war is no longer gliding forward on momentum. It is dragging itself across space. Operation Barbarossa has expanded the conflict beyond anything Germany's planners truly prepared for. Distances are no longer measured in days, but in weeks. Supply lines snake back hundreds of miles over roads that barely deserve the name. The doctrine is still the same. Break through. Encircle. Destroy. But the environment is different. The land absorbs movement. It stretches time. It punishes precision. German units at the front are still tactically effective. Battalion commanders maneuver skillfully. Junior officers show initiative. Yet something essential is missing. Sustainment. The German army entered the war with limited motorization. Much of its logistics still depends on horses. Rail transport is critical, but incompatible gauges slow everything down. Every kilometer forward creates new demand behind. Fuel consumption rises sharply. Maintenance becomes constant. Replacement parts lag behind the advance. None of this is decisive in isolation. Together, it becomes a pattern. Frontline units begin to wait. Not for orders, but for supplies. A panzer regiment pauses not because the enemy resists, but because fuel has not arrived. An infantry division halts while artillery shells are rationed. Time, once Germany's greatest ally, becomes an enemy. This is the blind spot revealing itself. German strategic thinking has always emphasized the operational level. The movement of formations, the timing of attacks, the exploitation of breakthroughs. Less attention is paid to what happens when those operations must be sustained over vast space. The assumption remains that campaigns will be short, that decisive battles will end resistance before strain accumulates. But the Soviet Union does not collapse. Instead, it bends. German commanders push forward anyway, convinced that success is just one more effort away. Each pause feels intolerable. Each delay feels like failure. So the system is stretched further. Supply units are ordered to do the impossible. Maintenance schedules are skipped. Vehicles run until they break. Losses mount, not from combat, but from exhaustion. You can see it in the small details. Soldiers wearing mismatched boots. Units scavenging abandoned equipment. Fuel trucks arriving half empty. The front keeps moving, but the foundation is cracking. Strategic depth, the ability to absorb losses, rotate units, replenish strength, is something Germany does not truly possess. Not at this scale. Not against this kind of war. What makes this blind spot so dangerous is that it doesn't announce itself as failure. It appears as friction, as inconvenience, as delay. Things that aggressive armies are trained to overcome. And so Germany responds the only way it knows how. By pushing harder. By demanding more speed from a system already at its limit. By treating structural weakness as a temporary obstacle. As winter approaches, the consequences sharpen. Cold damages equipment. Roads vanish entirely. Engines fail. Supply lines stretch thinner still. The German army has not lost its tactical skill. It has lost its margin. And once that margin is gone, Every setback becomes amplified. A delayed shipment becomes a stalled offensive. A broken bridge becomes a strategic pause. A missed opportunity becomes irreversible. The blind spot is no longer theoretical. It is now shaping outcomes. And as German commanders look ahead, they begin to sense something unsettling. If speed can no longer save them, what exactly is holding this war together? Winter, 1942. The outskirts of Stalingrad. Early morning. Snow drifts across shattered ground. Ruined buildings cast long shadows. The sound of engines is gone. A German infantry officer peers through a broken wall, binoculars fogging in the cold. What he sees is not a breakthrough, but more enemy movement. Again, you can almost feel the frustration settle in. Not fear. Something worse. Realization. For the first time, German commanders are facing an opponent whose greatest strength is not speed, or surprise, or even tactical brilliance. It is depth. The Soviet Union absorbs losses in a way Germany cannot. Units are destroyed and replaced. Territory is lost and traded for time. What Germany once dismissed as disorder is revealed as resilience. This is where the blind spot becomes impossible to ignore. German doctrine is built around decisive operations. Encirclement. Destruction. Finality. But these concepts depend on an enemy who breaks, politically, militarily, psychologically. The Soviets do not. They retreat, regroup, and return, often stronger. Behind the front, factories are relocated. Production increases. Manpower pools deepen. German intelligence reports the numbers, but the implications are slow to sink in. Germany has planned for victory, not endurance. Its strategic thinking assumes that superior operational skill will shorten the war before resources become decisive. But now resources are everything. In Stalingrad, the limits converge. The Sixth Army advances too far, too fast, into a city that devours momentum. Urban combat slows movement to a crawl. Supply routes narrow to a few vulnerable corridors. When those corridors are cut, there is no depth to fall back into. No reserve mass to restore balance. Air supply is attempted. It is insufficient. The German system, designed for movement, cannot function when fixed in place. The enemy, by contrast, can afford to lose space to gain position. They have depth, geographic, industrial, human. Germany does not. This imbalance is not just material. It is conceptual. German planners still think in terms of campaigns. The enemy is thinking in terms of wars. As the encirclement tightens, decisions become constrained by what no longer exists. Fuel, ammunition, options. The Sixth Army does not collapse suddenly. It is compressed. Each day reduces choice. What unfolds at Stalingrad is not simply a defeat. It is exposure. The blind spot is fully illuminated. Germany's way of war depends on winning before the cost of continuation becomes unbearable. Once that condition fails, the system turns against itself. Elsewhere, the pattern repeats. In North Africa, supply lines stretch across deserts and seas. In Italy, terrain slows movement and magnifies every logistical weakness. In the air war, Germany struggles to replace losses at the same rate as its enemies. The Allies can lose and recover. Germany cannot. This is the true meaning of strategic depth. Not just land, but capacity. Capacity to endure mistakes. Capacity to absorb shocks. Capacity to fight a long war. Germany entered the conflict without building that capacity. And now, the war is long. What makes this blind spot so devastating is that it does not negate German skill. It renders it insufficient. Brilliant maneuvers achieve temporary success, but cannot be sustained. Each campaign drains strength faster than it can be restored. By 1943, German commanders are no longer asking how to win decisively. They are asking how to survive the next operation. The shift is subtle but profound. Once an army begins fighting for time rather than outcome, its strategic position is already lost. At Stalingrad, the cost is catastrophic. But the lesson extends far beyond one city. Germany's greatest weakness was never a single decision or leader. It was a structural inability to fight a war of attrition against opponents who could afford one. And as the front lines stabilize and then begin to roll backward, the implications become unavoidable. If the enemy can lose more, rebuild faster, and fight longer, what happens when Germany's margin disappears everywhere at once? Summer 1943. Southern Russia. The morning heat is already rising. Tank engines idle in open fields, crews waiting beside them. Dust coats everything. Boots, uniforms, optics. Maps are unfolded again and again, but nothing changes. This time, Germany is not attacking into uncertainty. It is attacking into preparation. At Kursk, the German army commits its remaining operational strength to one more decisive effort. The logic is familiar. Break the enemy's defensive belt. Exploit the breakthrough. Restore initiative. But the conditions have shifted. The enemy has depth now, not just in manpower, but in time. They know the attack is coming. They prepare layered defenses measured in miles, not meters. Minefields. Anti-tank positions. Reserves positioned to counter, not collapse. German units advance anyway. Tactically, they perform well. Crews maneuver skillfully. Officers coordinate under fire. But every kilometer costs more than the last. Vehicles break down faster than they can be repaired. Recovery units cannot reach the front. Fuel deliveries fall behind schedule. This is where friction becomes fate. What once could be solved by improvisation now compounds too quickly. A delayed unit disrupts timing. Disrupted timing exposes flanks. Exposed flanks require reinforcement, which must come from somewhere else. The system cannibalizes itself. German command still believes in decisive battle, still believes that one more effort can reverse momentum. But decisive battles require surplus. Surplus fuel. Surplus men. Surplus time. Germany has none. Meanwhile, the enemy absorbs losses and responds methodically. Defensive belts give way and are replaced by counterattacks. Losses are accepted, calculated, replenished. The German offensive slows. Then stalls. When the order to halt finally arrives, it does not feel sudden. It feels overdue. From this point forward, Germany no longer dictates the terms of the war. Every offensive becomes a gamble. Every gamble consumes irreplaceable strength. The blind spot is now irreversible. Germany's strategic culture has no answer to sustained attrition. No mechanism to rebuild faster than it bleeds. The war does not punish Germany for fighting poorly. It punishes Germany for fighting brilliantly, too expensively. As the initiative passes permanently to the Allies, German forces retreat into a role they were never designed for. Prolonged defense across multiple fronts. The doctrine that once delivered speed and shock now struggles to manage withdrawal and endurance. And as the fronts widen, the consequences converge. Losses in one theatre cannot be offset by success in another. There is no depth left to draw from. What began as friction, delays, shortages, pauses, has become destiny. By late 1943, the question is no longer how Germany can win. It is how long it can continue fighting at all. And as the war enters its final phase, the blind spot that once hid behind momentum now defines everything that follows. Winter, 1944. Somewhere west of the Rhine. Early evening. Snow clings to ruined buildings. Artillery flashes in the distance, slow and methodical. German units dig in again, not to prepare an advance, but to slow what is coming. The war has inverted. Germany is no longer trying to shape events. It is reacting to them. Every front tells the same story. In the West, Allied forces rebuild faster than Germany can disrupt them. Losses are replaced. Equipment arrives in waves. Air power dominates movement and logistics. In the East, the Red Army advances with overwhelming mass. Each retreat shortens German lines, but also reduces flexibility. Every withdrawal costs equipment that cannot be replaced. The blind spot that once existed quietly beneath success is now fully exposed. Germany cannot regenerate combat power at the rate the war demands. This is not just about factories or fuel. It is about system design. German strategy was optimized for winning quickly. It assumed that decisive operations would conclude campaigns before cumulative weakness mattered. But the war refuses to end. And so every strength becomes a liability. Highly trained units suffer irreplaceable losses. Elite formations are used again and again until they cease to exist as such. New units are formed without experience, cohesion, or time. Commanders are forced to choose where to lose. They shift divisions from one collapsing front to another, arriving too late and too weak to change outcomes. The system no longer breaks dramatically. It erodes. Even Germany's final offensives reflect the same blind spot. They aim to restore momentum, to force uncertainty, to regain initiative. But initiative requires resources. The Ardennes offensive is planned with precision and optimism, and undermined by the same structural limits that doomed earlier campaigns. Fuel is insufficient. Reserves are shallow. The margin for error is non-existent. Once the offensive stalls, there is nothing left to sustain it. This pattern repeats everywhere. Germany continues to fight with skill and discipline, but skill cannot substitute for depth. The enemy can absorb loss and respond. Germany cannot. By early 1945, the outcome is no longer in question. What remains is endurance. German units fight delaying actions not to win, but to buy time. Time for civilians to flee. Time for negotiations that will never come. Time for the inevitable to arrive more slowly. The blind spot has become the defining feature of the war's end. Germany entered World War II believing that operational brilliance could compensate for strategic limitation. For a time, it did. But war is not decided by how it begins. It is decided by what a nation can sustain. Germany built an army designed to move fast, strike hard, and end wars early. What it faced instead was a conflict that demanded patience, depth, and endurance, qualities it never fully prepared for. And once that truth became unavoidable, every remaining decision was shaped by what Germany no longer had. The war would continue, but the system that Germany brought into it could not. April 1945. Berlin. Late afternoon. The city shakes under distant artillery. Buildings stand hollowed, their windows empty. Smoke drifts slowly through streets that no longer serve any purpose. In a ruined command room, maps still hang on the walls. Front lines are marked, though they have little meaning now. What remains of Germany's military effort is compressed into fragments. Units fight where they stand. Not to regain ground, but because there is nowhere else to go. The blind spot that once hid behind speed and confidence has finally consumed everything. Germany's strategic failure was not a lack of courage, training, or intelligence. It was the absence of endurance. From the first day of the war, Germany assumed that operational excellence could replace strategic depth. That wars would be decided before systems were tested. For a time, that assumption held. But the moment the war became global, industrial, and prolonged, the weakness surfaced. Every campaign drew down strength faster than it could be restored. Every setback reduced future options. There was no reserve of time. No surplus of capacity. The war punished this imbalance relentlessly. In the end, Germany did not lose because its soldiers stopped fighting well. It lost because its system could not survive the demands placed upon it. This blind spot was never corrected. Not in doctrine. Not in production. Not in strategic culture. Even late adjustments could not overcome a structure built for short wars. By the time German leaders fully understood the nature of the conflict they were in, it was already too late to change it. The war's final months are not defined by surprise or collapse, but by inevitability. The strategic blind spot that went unaddressed in 1939 now shapes every shattered street and empty position in 1945. What began as confidence ends as exhaustion. And in that arc lies the central lesson of Germany's war. Brilliance without endurance cannot win a long fight. The blind spot was never a single decision or moment. It was a way of thinking, one that worked brilliantly, briefly, and then failed completely.